Hello, and welcome to Harmonia Radio, where me and Alethea discuss random things. I'm Keith, by the way. Hopefully you recognise the voice by now. If not, welcome to your first episode. So this week we're going to discuss something which has been fairly topical, if you've kept up with the Harmonia blog. I was writing about what it means to be a master, and people who have ventured into the hangouts that we hold every Wednesday and Friday might know it's been something of a topic: mastery, being a knight, recognition, peer assessment among the Jedi. So a lot of people fall on two lines when it comes to recognising ranks in the Jedi community. Some people feel that they're largely arbitrary, and some people feel that they are very concrete things which are to be respected. I have my opinions, but I've already dominated the first few minutes of the conversation, so I'll let Alethea take over. Where do you fall on the line of what ranks mean?
Ranks are a responsibility. Now, a responsibility who or what is kind of more defined by where you get your title from. For example, at Force Academy, when we were knighting people, and we have knights and we have masters, knights were effectively people that we had said, okay, yeah, we believe that you can train. And then when you got to master, we believed that you could actually produce works and continue on the education. You had proven that you had been able to do this. But you still had to maintain the responsibility of knight where you teach.
Yes. So if we look at that from academic terms, you might see it as something of the assistant professor, the person doing their PhD who has to do some teaching on the side, and the person who is actually there to be a lecturer.
Correct.
So there's someone who's there to produce research, produce material for the future, and someone who's literally just there to teach. So the master sort of superseded the simply lecturing aspect of teaching. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think from an organisational structure, I think very few people would argue from the necessity of that. You do in any organisation which builds itself around teaching and so forth, you do have to have ranks which indicate this person has been acknowledged as, worthy of teaching. We have endorsed this person as a teacher. We believe they're qualified, and then of course there then has to be people who you then say, we believe these people are qualified to work in a managerial role, in a advisory role, and so on and so forth. So I don't think anyone would argue with that baseline necessity from an organisational structure.
Well, and that's one way to look at it, but there's other orders who believe or who seem to structure their knighthood around the idea that you have proven you can walk the Jedi path. And so becoming a Jedi Knight is saying, okay, yes, you do walk the Jedi path. That we believe that you walk the Jedi path because you've passed all these tests.
Yeah.
Kind of like a rite of passage that you would get maybe if you were a Freemason to go to the next degree.
Well, if we were Freemasons, we'd have a lot more money.
That's true. That's very true.
But not that analogy does not scale. But I see what you mean. I suppose that comes something from our mystical background, our New Age religion links. Where you go through ranks in a lot of mystical orders. They are rites of initiation, more secrets and so forth. They don't necessarily scale to responsibility so much as you are being given more acknowledgement. So, okay. I suppose that's the thing, I suppose, and that's where the conversation becomes difficult, because we don't know, across orders, we don't necessarily define particularly well what one order means by knight and what another order means by knight. I mean, for example, I've noticed in a lot of organisations, and I have talked about it in the past, in Jedi communities especially, I see a lot of people, their apprenticeship is focused on becoming a really good Jedi. Developing the skills, developing the prowesses, seeing how the different virtues, values, how they apply those concepts to their lives. And they pass the test, so yes, they are living the Jedi way. And then they are endorsed with this title of Knight, which sort of endorses that, yes, you can now teach. But you then look at the training program to get to Knight and you realize actually there's nothing about being a mentor in there.
And that was a conversation that you told me you had on Friday last week, right?
Yes. And again, that scales to the issue of master. Because the Malcolm Master, is someone who has developed great self-mastery. They're not just a person who does what the Jedi Code says. They live the Jedi way. It's a part of them.
And usually when I see organizations that believe that, they tend to say, okay, no, you have to have been on the Jedi path as a knight for so many years. I've seen some really high numbers. You got to be doing it for 30 years before you even get master. And then you also have to go through all these different steps to get there. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but then you see, but comparatively to them, you see people who say, oh no, I mean, a 5-year could easily prove that you know how to do it.
I think the reality is that the difference there is the attitude towards the skill set. Because I know people with skill sets and abilities who are still knights or even apprentices, who, in terms of their skill set, what they bring to being a Jedi blows some people I know who have been identified as Jedi Masters out of the water. And I mean, that's something I feel I've been cursed with Harmonia, because a lot of the students we've had sign up, to be frank, they're very far along in their own Jedi path, and there's not a lot, Not saying our material is bad or anything, by the way. I'm just saying that it is something of a curse sometimes. There are people who come into the Jedi path who have a lot of life experience. They've developed a lot of skills, and when you have a skill-based judgment system, it's very difficult to say, hang on a minute, you don't have the right skills and so forth. So as I said, I have met people who've come in and their skill set blows a number of people I know identified as Jedi Masters out of the water.
Well, when you look at it from that perspective, then you can also take it as a college, even if you have all of the knowledge. I graduated with honors from my school.
Excellent.
And I should have I was almost at high honors or whatever the next one up is. But the only reason that I didn't get it was because of a error on my computer or with my connection. And just one assignment out of the entire curriculum broke it. And that was, it was a final paper, and it didn't actually send, and I did not know that it didn't send until 2 weeks after the class had ended, and I was like, why haven't I gotten my credit for this thing? And then I found something, and I was like, oh, that's why. And it brought my grade down, my GPA down by 1 or 2 points for the whole time. Otherwise, I could have had high honors. But when you look at it from that perspective, I was on the dean's list every semester. Every semester. I was always on the dean's list. And I felt like I didn't do a lot. I really, it somewhat upset me that I was on the dean's list. Because I felt like this stuff is easy.
Yes.
But you had to go through to get that, to say,
yes,
okay, this person does know. We have tested this person throughout 4 years worth of time to prove that they know what they're talking about, and we can say we can put this person out there in the field to start beginning their job, or not that I've been able to do that job yet. I don't live anywhere where disasters happen, unfortunately. Yeah, isn't that weird? Unfortunately, I don't live in a place where there's disasters that happen.
Have you considered Washington, D.C.? Sorry.
The problem is
political. Sorry.
Moving is the issue. Is that I would not mind going to Washington D.C. because I'm actually pretty good in counterterrorism, according to my college degree. That I could step into that and learn a great deal.
Yes, but that's what I mean. Going back to this skill-based assessment, there are people who've only been in for 5 years, and as I said, if we're only looking at skills, you could say, yes, that person should be a Jedi Master. And then we do have, and I think that's why people often argue that it's arbitrary. Because you have these skilled people who come into the path and they don't get very far with it. Because it's not for them. So from that skills only perspective, it's very dangerous. I mean, I think, I'm not going to name any names because I forget the name exactly, but I remember once reading a skills list of every skill a Jedi Knight should feasibly have. And I remember seeing stuff like lifeguarding and so forth, and I just remember thinking to myself, I'd never need the lifeguarding skill in my life.
Yeah, I actually do know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm not going to bring up the name to blast that person.
No, as I said, I can't recall the name. But my point is,
I do, but I'm not going to blast that person because
my point
they have some other good ideas that they put out there. But I sat there and I looked at them and I was like, I know people who will never go near a pool or a body of water, a massive body of water, unless they're driving over it. And if they're driving over it, they're not going to notice somebody that's, in the water, or they're not going to jump back into the water to go after somebody who's jumped. It would be more appropriate for them, if that was going to be the case, to learn psychological first aid.
Indeed. And what I was going to say is the reality of a lot of skills which are taught, lifeguarding skills and so forth, they're taught with the concept that you're going to have the backup and support. Most emergency first aid is taught with the basic concept that you are going to have a first aid kit to hand. You are going to have something to allow you to do the job.
Oh, well, see, if I'm from the Army perspective, I just tear off the shirt I have on and use it as a tourniquet. So, I mean, you've got stuff on you.
Yeah, but yes, and I mean, so I think this is where the arbitrary argument, that the ranks are arbitrary argument, comes into play, is that when you have only a very specific standardized skills, there comes a point where you have to say, well, how does anyone learn all those? Or, well, there's this person who has the majority of his skills, why aren't they ranked Jedi Master on the basis of this checklist?
Well, I don't think it's skills so much as values.
Yes,
that
and
we judge people by.
Yeah, and that's the next part I was going to come on to. We do have this sense of the other aspect of it is how someone is living, how someone embodies the values, and whether they share the values we have as Jedi. And I think that's where, again, the arbitrariness comes into play, because I think people then argue, well, it's a popularity contest. It's whoever's been endorsed to be the ranking bodies who then feel, when you're talking about someone's character, how they live their life, favoritism becomes incredibly dangerous. So I think it's very easy to undermine the whole argument for having ranks.
Yeah, very much so.
Very easy, and I think the problem is that people do choose the easy path, and they like to think, well, the ranks don't matter. Because, as I said, they are human constructs. We construct them as Jedi. We construct them, what they mean, and so on and so forth. And that's where it becomes very difficult to put into perspective ranks. But we've already discussed one reason they're very useful: to structure your organisation, to say who has been endorsed as teachers, who have been endorsed as administrators, managers, and so on and so forth. The danger then becomes, are the way these ranks earned, awarded, are they scaled properly? Are people being taught the skills to thrive, not just exist, but thrive in the responsibilities they've been given? I mean, you see it in a lot of workplaces, for example. If you take, say, civic engineering, with the digitalization and so forth, with everyone having their own personal computer and so forth, middle management now involves a lot more paperwork than it once did, and people have to do a lot more self-management than they once did.
Yep.
And what you find is that, and the thing is that companies and so forth get into this habit of promoting based on, is this person good at the job they're doing? Brilliant, we shall promote them. But a lot of promotion isn't just promoting you to then do more things at what you're good at. It promotes you to take more responsibility, and that often includes leadership roles, managerial roles, and so on and so forth. And if you're a really good civic engineer doing engineering, but you're a terrible manager, being promoted is not good for you, because you're going to be promoted to managerial tasks which you have no training in.
And I'm going to kind of just side caveat on this. There was a point in time when the Army recognized this in the U.S. And they had 2 separate tracks. Okay, so after you were lower enlisted, there was you had E1 through E4 as your lower enlisted, and then E4 could also split off and be a kind of more manager position, a more leadership position. It was called the NCO track. And the other track, which would allow you to climb up side by side with your leadership, was specialist. So you'd have spec 4, spec 5, I think it went up like that. I think it was like 5, 6, 7 to go with the enlisted number that you were assigned to. And as you climbed up, you could basically just specialize in your job and you wouldn't have to do the leadership stuff. And then eventually they did away with the secondary climbing rank and just said, no, you all have to become leaders. So now you're all NCOs. And for some of us, there was a point of contention where it was just like, well, we don't want to do the leadership thing because on top of that, we have to do all this other stuff.
Yeah. And
it does not pay enough to climb that next rank.
No.
It's like you give us, what, $400 more a month? If that?
And to be honest, the military indeed is a great example of the people. Because, of course, you have an officer corps. And they're the ones who are supposed to do the managerial work. That is what they should exist to do.
Well, yes. However, there are the structure is not just that. Yeah, they do managerial work.
Yeah.
And actually they do have kind of there's a structure in between the officers and the enlisted called warrant officers. And those are specialized people. They specialize in certain jobs and whatnot. But here's the thing. When you get down on the lower levels, their leadership takes on roles like being the person in charge of not a squad, not a convoy. I know the word. I was in for 8.5 years and I can't think of the word. A Humvee, a truck. So you're in a convoy. So you're in a convoy and you're in a truck, and the person that's in charge of that truck is an NCO, and they would be the ones calling the shots. Hey, fire! You need to fire off this way. If something happens and their radio man goes down, they can jump on the radio and start talking. I mean, you're supposed to train everybody in the truck to be able to do this stuff. They'll if they hear, so they have to listen, and if they hear something, hey, contact left. And I know some of y'all are like, what on earth is she talking about? I'm talking about combat operations that your officers will not go into because they have to be back doing other things, or they have to be the one that goes out there and communicates. So some of the things that we do over there in Iraq and Afghanistan, and just any real operation, is we might have an officer go out to communicate with a local leader, either whether it be a spiritual leader or something like a town mayor kind of situation, a tribal leader, to communicate with them about what they need, and they'll negotiate. The officers are there to learn more about what's going on, while the leaders, the NCOs, are there to command what's going to happen next. They have to execute whatever the tactical team has come up with, the tactical operations, and then just kind of traverse their way through the problem depending on what happens. So they've got to be able to manage all that. So we have a certain reason why the structures are the structures they are. Yeah. But it gets all very complicated. It makes a lot of sense when you're in the culture. But to explain it to people who don't understand, it's a little bit difficult.
Oh, fair enough. But I think it's a useful caveat, and it's a useful exploration of command and managerial structures, which you don't often encounter in the civilian world. Because in the civilian world, managerial roles, your companies are usually one-dimensional. They exist to do one job and do that job incredibly well. So, for example, IT, electronics companies, and so forth. Military is one of those few things where you have to have a lot of people with a lot of very different skill sets doing very different things. And I think that's why I wanted to bring that up to an extent. Because as Jedi organizations, we do have to ask, what are we doing? So, for example, we do talk about skill sets, going out and helping people. But as orders, as groups, how do we organize ourselves into doing that?
Especially when we're mostly online. I mean, if you were an offline organization and say, I don't know, you started like a, what would be something that could translate fairly well?
Yeah.
Disaster management, actually, which happens to be my degree. But
actually,
you have a lot of things.
An example I was going to use is an organization part of St. John. And the thing is that we are divided into units. And as units, we are relatively autonomous. And the thing is you need a rank structure when the different units interact. And I think if you look at Jedi organizations, when chapters interact and so forth, we do have to start asking ourselves, well, how are the ranks mingling? How are we making ranks make sense? What can we expect? So, for example, if we do come together as different chapters to organize an event or something, what can we ask apprentices to do? What have they been trained to do in a situation? What can we ask people to volunteer to do? What official certifications, what training, what liabilities are we vulnerable to? And I think that's where we have to start getting away from this notion that ranks and so forth can be arbitrary. They can't be. If we want to interact with the real world, if we want to come together more as groups instead of just individuals doing our own thing, we have to get to a point where ranks mean something.
Absolutely. So I do want to say that online, I feel that the rank does matter because it does say that this person has shown that they can teach. I want that. Like, okay, so it was asked me one time, why do you want this rank? Why do you want to be a Jedi Knight? And, some people, they'll try to get you to say that the reason you want to be a Jedi Knight is because you feel like you are one. Because they believe that by saying anything else is a humbling act. But for me, I have been a Jedi Knight already at Force Academy. I gotten my knighthood there.
Yeah.
And I have been given it just like outright and been like, oh, okay, here you go, you're a Jedi Knight. And I'm kind of like, okay, why? I mean, what do you see in me? And these are usually organizations that are just setting up and they're asking me to come on board and help them run their program.
You do encounter that a lot, unfortunately.
Well, yes. And they'll sit there and they'll say, okay, yes, I recognize you as this, but for me, it would have to be like, okay, do I recognize you? Do I have time? I mean, even if I do recognize you, do I have time to do that? Or do I have another project that requires my attention more and I would be taking away from your organization by trying to jump in?
Yeah.
So when I look at it from those perspectives, though, they are saying, hey, I trust you. I believe that you are this. But what I have to take into when I look at other people, if I say, hey, and I did this with Keith, guys. I looked at Keith and I'd seen that he was over at Tenebrae Sergeant. Is that how you say that?
That's how you pronounce it.
All right.
It is bastardized Latin, so bastardize it all you like.
That's fair. So anyways, I'd seen him at Tenebrae Sergeant for years, and Real Jedi Knights, which is now Jedi Knights. You can find them at jediknights.b1.jcink.com.
Come full circle.
Yeah, so Yeah, because they used to be called Jedi Knights first, and then they became real Jedi Knights, and now they're Jedi Knights again. Yeah. So, but anyway, so I'd seen him over at those places, and he didn't have a home anymore. And I was like, I need more people over at Force Academy that can teach, and I need to build our program. So I went to him and I said, hey, Keith, would you mind coming over to Force Academy? We'll put you through a review, so we can get you on the team, because we have this retroactive type thing where if you pass our test, you don't have to go through the training program at the time. It was a reciprocal.
I went through the training program anyway because I'm stubborn.
Hey, that's fine, and I love that. I'd wish that more people who claimed that they were knights and had the time, because some of them did not, had the time, would have actually gone back through and done it too, so they knew what they were grading people on. I even did my own training program, though I didn't write a lot of it down, but I did go through it on my own time. So I asked him to come on, but we were an established order for a long time. I mean, we're like, FA is the longest running.
I suppose it must be now, actually.
Yeah, like 1998.
Yeah.
Non-stop.
I can't think of any other group which is. RJK is quite long-lived, but that's still
2001. Yeah, 2001. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of orders that have been around for more than a decade, but Force Academy for some reason has survived the time. Even, I mean, we've had to move domains. We started out as .com, that software broke, and then we went to co.uk, and then that software was getting wonky, or the server was getting wonky. It was a server. Yeah. So now we're over at .us.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've been going strong.
Yeah, it's been going strong. I mean, and I think if the only thing I would say is, as an organisation, is it's kept alive by the fact that new personalities come along and they are encouraged to grow and take over.
Well, I think it's also because we have old personalities come in from time to time.
Yeah,
like we had somebody that recently came in, and I saw him. He was like, "Hey, can I get assigned to the blue?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in like 7 years."
I mean, that. And going back to ranks, just to tie this back in, I mean, a couple of years ago now, when I was handed the reins of the LA, the light aspect as it was, I did enact a fitness for role policy, which basically said if you come back, you have to be interviewed and we have to go through and see if you're still fit for the title.
Yeah.
You know, you can't come back and say I was a master back in, say, 2004 and expect to be handed it back. No. Because
absolutely.
I wanted the ranks to mean something. Yeah, and the same will always be true of Harmonia.
Yeah, and Temple of the Jedi Order had that implemented also, except that what they said was it wasn't a fitness for role, but because it had been like, if you've been gone for over 7 years, I guess, the program can transform over that time.
Yeah.
And so we see that there was an evolution, and now you've got to go through that evolution so you know what we're about, because you may not be aligned with us anymore. Or you left on us, and how do we know you're not going to leave again? We want to see your commitment. Exactly. And those are great.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to another angle in all of this, is that every organisation for a long time has had its own standard of awarding rank. And something that has changed since 2015, basically, is if you look at the Jedi Compass and you look at all the contributing orders and so on and so forth, that's the majority of the Jedi community worth talking about, to be frank. You've got something from all the major groups, the long-standing ones, some which are relatively young, a number which have taken being a Jedi into the real world. And, I mean, as I described it, if Jediism survives several centuries, I think you could possibly look at the Jedi Compass as the equivalent of our Council of Nicaea. It's where a lot came together and said, this is what it means to be a Jedi. And I think that's something we can now use to judge what is a Jedi Knight, what is a Jedi Master. because that is a peer assessment. That is what the peers amongst the Jedi see a Jedi being. And if you don't live up to that, are you really a Jedi? Now, you might argue that Jedi is a human construct and that anyone can claim to be a Jedi, and they can. They honestly can. But since 2015, you can find a document which will outline what it means to be a real Jedi. You have a definition. And if you don't live up to that, you are not a real Jedi. You are just someone claiming to be a Jedi.
And I feel the same way. And, and I will caveat on that all their other documents, the documents for those orders, also agree with the Jedi Compass. Yeah. So, yeah, it would kind of be our Council of Nicaea, but it's also a matter, you could also go back, unlike how Christianity kind of says, okay, no, you can't look at these other books because they're not canon. But you can look at the other documents that predate 2015 or even the ones that are after that and look at it and say, hey, does this agree with the Jedi Compass? Does it agree at the minimum with it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
Instead of going lower bar, or does it go above it?
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
In my opinion.
It's a very flexible document. It's quite easy to be very different from your peers and still be consistent with the Jedi Compass and still feel. That's why the Jedi Prowesses are written as they are written.
Yep. So, I kind of wanted to say that I think that this is something I wanted to complete my thought from earlier, but I had been asked, so going back to how I started that thought, I had been asked, why do you want to be a Jedi Knight? And honestly, my answer is not for me. And it's not for you guys either. It's for anybody that wants to become my student. So that they know, they are aware that I have been through the ringer.
Yes. And
people have said, yes, this person right here, I agree she can teach you what the Jedi path is, and she lives it.
Yeah. I mean, because
peer review is important. We even see that in academic stuff.
Yeah, of course you do. I mean, it's not as effective as we would love it to be, but unfortunately, it's a better system than none. I mean, I think going back to what I wrote about this topic to an extent, there is something I wrote about finding a good teacher. And there's a point in it is, what sort of students has the teacher produced? What have they achieved themselves? And are they well spoken about by people whose views are trustworthy? And that's fundamental to being a knight or a master. Are you actually producing people who are then seen to be, oh, that's a good Jedi. That's someone who extols our path well. And people will look at your achievements and say, yes, those are very Jedi-like achievements. That person, they go out, they contribute to their community. They organize things to help with their community, and so on and so forth. So, and
there's another part to this component, and that's, who are your peers?
Yeah.
Because who you allow to judge you as a knight or a master, like in an official capacity, is important. Just like going to a school, getting your work reviewed by Harvard is a lot better than having it reviewed by the community college down the street.
It's mostly who you get to connect with in those. But I agree with the basic premises that definitely there is white coat syndrome, which is important to respect. As said, at Harvard, they're better funded, but at the same time, they usually, in turn, they're better, reviewed and so forth. That is definitely it. I mean, there's a saying, I like it, which is, you are who you associate with. So, if you're a Jedi Master, but you associate with people who, are not well respected.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one. Because you should not judge a book by its cover in that respect, by who they hang out with. And here's why I say that. Look at, and guys, I'm going to get a little religious here. Look at Jesus Christ. He was down there with the lowest of low, and the prestigious people did not like him at all.
No, that's very true. That's
So
very true.
it's
But
my
I think,
yeah.
that is an important caveat. And what I was then going to say is you have to look at why are they associating that with those people. I mean, yeah, he was associating with those people, but he was associating with them to change their ways. And I think that's an important thing. Why is this individual associating with these particular groups? Well, maybe it is a group of people. I mean, for example, if you did not know my job, I'm a psychologist, by the way, and you just judged by the people I walk around and I say hello to, you'd probably think I was a massive drug baron. Because, I'm sorry, but it's true. A lot of people, and I'm a first aider with St. John, and I interact with a lot of different social groups, and the reality is that if you just followed me around a day, and everyone I said hello to, you'd think, how does he interact with all these different people? And your immediate thought would probably be that, as I said, I'm a drug dealer. Because that's
and that's why I said whoever certifies you, that you need to pick your peers, the people who certify you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean. It's the thing is as a Jedi, it's if a Jedi goes out there and they do awful things, it then takes 100 of the rest of us to make up for that.
Yeah. I think that's a quote in some book, isn't it?
If it is, I'm sorry for stealing it and not what it is.
I think it's actually something that people like. I've seen it quoted in the Jedi community a few times, and I think it comes from. I think it comes from a Star Wars book.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I was just ad-libbing, but because it's something said in a lot of uniformed services.
That's fair.
It's if one of us messes up and looks bad, the problem is if the media catch on to it, it then takes the rest of us to make up for your. So mistakes do happen, but don't get lazy. Don't open yourself up to making mistakes. I mean, one of my trainers, he always had a great analogy because you get the paperwork. And if you fold it out, it's just about large enough to cover your ass. So that's why we do paperwork. It's to cover your ass. Swearing on an Harmonia radio.
Yep.
I
was going to call you out on it, but you found yourself in there, so. Good self-awareness. Good catch.
Yes. No. Grow up, children. You can deal with it. But yes, I mean, there's so much that can be said that I don't think we're going to encapsulate in 30, 40 minutes the difficulties of this. And the problem is you're always going to get people in this community who want to be part of this community. Rank is arbitrary. And I think if you do see that, call them out on it. Because if they can't back up their criticism, their fear is not that ranks are problematic or destructive. It's that they don't want to go through the rigmarole.
Well, and I think that some of them just see people grabbing after the rank and think that that's all that they want. I've seen people that grab after rank, and I can understand not wanting that, but maybe you don't actually understand what that person's all about. Over at the other night, they had Jedi Realist Radio had Alan Wilson from Arcanea, Jedi, who he had come into the community and he was calling himself Master already.
Oh.
But he was actively doing a lot of stuff in Florida with his order, and he was putting together programs that helped with what was it? Red Cross.
Oh,
and other things like that, and they've got like a PTSD program for people down there that has them going out paintballing, and they actually have therapists that they work with for these people with PTSD. And so because people didn't see that or know what was going on, they thought that he was just claiming a rank, when no, in reality his peers had set him up and said, no, we believe that you are a master because you are living this path out and you're doing things for your community.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's the thing, is that that will always be the thing. I think it's a problem from 2015 before then. I think there were definitely 15, 17, 18 years where because every online organization ran its own ranking system, had its own concept of what it means to be a Jedi. And definitely, I mean, if you, for example, let's look at Temple of the Jedi Order. They are an example where rank to an extent actually means something in a certifiable way, because they have an ordaining system.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is some legal binding activity going on there of earning some rank at the temple. And then a lot of organizations have never taken this step. I mean, we're looking into taking a similar step, but more details on that in the future as we figure out the details ourselves. But definitely, and that's the thing, you know, it was very easy for 15, 17 years for people to just start up a forum and say, I am the master here. I will dictate how things, the teachings and so on. And thankfully, some people actually landed on their feet and did the job. I mean, Brother John, who leads Temple of the Jedi Order, I mean, you know, he had his moments, but largely speaking, the man's done an unenviable job. You know, he's you know, he's been a big leader in our community, whether you respect what he's done with the temple or not. And there's other people who've landed on their feet and proven themselves as masters. And unfortunately, there's also the other end of the spectrum where for every one good person who started out being a master, 20 or so have failed. And I think that's what brought the title down a lot, is that for 15, 17 years, there really were no standards. But the reality now is that we've had people who've been at this for 20 years. In this conversation alone, we have over 30 years of experience being a Jedi. Our combined experience, mine and Alethea. You know, and that's the thing. That's the reality of it. Some people sank and some people swam. Yeah. And as I said, historically, you look back and there was a lot of failing. But now we're a mature enough community that we can look at these titles and say, what do these titles mean? What do these titles embody? Because we do have examples of the people who have succeeded. And we have the Jedi Compass, we have consensus between ourselves. And it's still an ongoing battle. And as I said, there's still people who are stuck in the past, who feel these titles are arbitrary. There are people who feel that we need to continue debating the meaning of Jedi. And this is me getting on my high horse.
Well, I have some closing thoughts myself before I let you go ahead and close us out. But my closing thoughts are, if you see somebody that says, it doesn't matter if you got certified, then if they're really saying that they don't believe in a certification process whatsoever, and they just believe that the only thing that matters is that you live. I mean, it does matter that you live out your Jedi path. In fact, at Harmonia, we believe strongly that the most important thing for you to obtain is the ability, the ability to act, to say with integrity that you are a Jedi.
Yeah. Just look at our course structure.
And so that's our major thing that we want to push here. Yes. But we do believe that knighthoods and mastership are important because they do breed future progress. So if you see somebody that's out there saying, no, your certification doesn't matter, that document that you have, that piece of paper that says that you passed and you managed to say that you were a Jedi Knight does not matter, understand something. Who cares what they say about that? If they cannot appreciate that their peers believed them at one point in time to be a Jedi Knight, even if they've fallen off the path now, then they have no real reason to appreciate themselves, and they're just trying to push that on you. Yeah. And don't let that get you down. Yeah. People approved you And unless you find those people to be less than Jedi when they did approve you, don't take that as a slight. It is something to be looked at with, yes, I have this achievement. All right, yes. I'm going to let you close it out.
No, I was just going to say, if you do encounter people who say that, give them this question. Are you going to trust the cardiological surgeon to treat your heart, or the witch doctor? Whose qualifications are you going to trust in that situation? All right?
I love it.
Yes. Anyway, so we do now have a statement with which we close with, of which I need to rediscover. Where have I put that?
I put it on here. I read it.
Yes, you did. Oh, dear. Where is it?
Chat.
Oh. There we go. I can see it there now. We have a closing statement. So thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. If not, why didn't you close this video sooner? You know, okay, you are free to leave. We're not holding you hostage. All right. So good night, good morning, Auf Wiedersehen, and so on and so forth. May you be transformed through your understanding of the Force.